We have one item on the agenda for the special meeting, and that is to approve the Cohasset Elementary 10-month principal position. Superintendent Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt? We just need to have a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Aye. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Superintendent Gross.
Okay, thank you. So the before you tonight is a recommendation for the hire of Dr. Ryan Siegley into the 10-month position for the Cohasset principal. That is a change. It was a 12-month position. It's been changed into a 10. Jill had been in that position previously as 12. She was also responsible for title, and Ryan won't be responsible for title. So we're recommending they go back to a 10-month. He's aware of that. Had a really good slate of interview candidates. A lot of, I think, a real competitive day, and it was really fun. But Dr. Siegley is an accomplished teacher, as I mentioned in my letter, has experience as an AP in the district and well respected by many in the district, and did a great job. And I'm recommending his hire for that position.
So moved by Pat.
Second.
Second by David. Discussion.
Matt, I would assume we'll probably see a leave of absence from his other position at some point in time in the future.
So actually, we've learned over the last 6 or 8 months in talking to our attorney that because principals in the law fall under the definition of teacher, their principals are entitled to continuing contract rights, or to continue them. So that leave of absence for him, if he were to be granted one, wouldn't provide him any more protection than he already has, since he's a tenured teacher in the district.
Okay.
So if that position were to be eliminated or something like that, he would have rights to a continuing contract position automatically.
Thank you.
Julie, we do not need a roll call vote then, right?
That's correct.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is passed. Congratulations to Ryan Siegley. There are no other items on the agenda. We're going to adjourn the meeting, and we'll come back at 6 o'clock for the workshop.
Immediately following, we'll start in another
Can we
minute.
immediately follow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Perfect.
So special meeting is adjourned. We'll come into session with the workshop. We have 3 items on the agenda for the workshop. Looks like the first item is a strategy team update.
All right, while Julie is pulling up the slide deck that we have, we're gonna tonight talk a little bit about the strategy team, what it's been up to, how that ties into the planning work. We got a little bit of a preview of that at a meeting recently, but we're gonna take a little bit deeper dive. Got a couple handouts for you to take a look at. As we move through, see, Julie, I don't know if do you have a clicker, or do you want me to just kind of
Right here.
I'll just do a little baton toss. Yeah. All right, great. We're going to talk about the team, why it exists, talk about the goals that the team's been working on, the process that it's been using as it's worked through the work in front of us. We'll talk a little bit about the work this year, progress we've made, and the plan for next year. And I want to recognize 3 members of the team that are here tonight: Ryan DeBay and Anna Lloyd and Carol Kopp. Both are all 3 of them members of the team. Other members on the team are Andy Forbort, Clayton Linder, Jen Shadeen, Joe Wheelock. I think that's the group, and Dan Adams. So that's the group that is on that team this year. There'll be some changes for next year, but that's who's been working with us this year. So in planning, where I've seen districts struggle and been in districts that have struggled, it's in this gap between coming up with a strategic plan or an operational plan and action. It's one thing to get this plan done that you are proud of, but it seems like in that gap is where organizations, districts run into trouble there and don't get traction. And so our solution to that was to develop this strategy team that had a role, a purpose of how do we take what this plan says and get things done. And so that's what we're going to walk through tonight. We're going to talk about kind of step back a little bit and set the stage a little, walk through the process and the outcomes that got us to where the strategy team could jump off from, and then the planning that we've been doing and how that aligns with the work that is happening on a day-to-day basis here. So as you know, this is a slide that I've actually shared in the past. This work started a couple of years ago, actually, with community engagement, input from staff. This happened through focus groups, one-on-one interviews, student surveys, community surveys. A lot of data was gathered to just find out what people thought about our school district, what their lived experiences were in our school district. One of the groups they talked to was graduates to find out what they thought. So a lot of people were involved in that input, and led then to the development of strategic directions. And I've used this word a lot in the last 6 months, but these are really, really important. These are the things that are going to be the bedrock that we do work around for quite some time going in the future. And these came through themes that showed themselves in this data over and over again. We developed a visual, and we'll take you can see that actually on the back of handout A, but that visual was developed through multiple iterations. This went to leadership teams, it went to whole groups, small groups, went to our directors and people kind of in a lot of different places to get some feedback on this. And it's a good visual representation of the work. And again, these 6 areas, the more time I spend thinking about them and digging into them, the more I'm proud of the work and the more I really do feel like this is going to be what we can hang our hat on or rally around for the foreseeable future. This was done, our community education department and staff they have working there developed this graphic for us, so I'm appreciative of that. When we had the strategic directions developed, we had conversations about where are we now compared to where we want to be, and how does that kind of end in view look? What does it look like when we're winning, when we're being successful in those areas? And so as a result of that, each one of these areas then kind of gets fleshed out. And so every one of these wedges, again, if you look at the back of handout A, you'll see the synopsis, if you will, the high level look at these strategic directions. But every one of these wedges, if you flip over that page, has a deeper level behind it. So if we're looking at equitable education, for instance, that is a summary of this strategic direction that really goes deeper into access, representation, and outcomes. The why talks about why is this something that showed up as important? Why do we feel like this is something we do need to address here? And then the what is that end in view? It's the what does it look like when we're winning here? When we're doing a good job, what does equitable education look like? And I'm not going to go through the process of reading all these, but you can see in each one of these cases, belonging then, if we look at the next one, belonging captures this idea of a culture of trust, engagement, and belonging, not just for students, but for staff or families. How does it feel when you're here? Again, the why was this important? The what is the end in view? What success looks like. And so we can kind of go around here. I shared this before, but we used to have evidence-based instruction here. And after discussion with our directors, they were like, evidence-based practices are important to us too in the kitchen and in the technology realm on the bus. And so let's broaden that a little bit. I got a question and some feedback a couple of weeks ago, and it was, well, what about our teaching and learning model that we have? Does that go away now? No, it's actually embedded in here. That's what an evidence-based practices look like, or evidence-based approaches look like in the classroom. So it doesn't go away. It's actually kind of foundational or embedded in here. Same with partnerships, the why, the rationale, and the end in view, communication. So I'd encourage you to spend some time taking a look at this. I'm really proud of these directions. Like I said, I do think they're the right work. I do think they speak to things that if we're hitting on all cylinders here as a school district in these 6 areas, we're going to be succeeding for our community and our families and our kids and our staff. After the development of these strategic directions, after talking about end in views and that gap analysis, that's when the operational plan was fleshed out. And if you take a look at handout B, that's what this operational plan is. This is this kind of, if you take a look here, you'll see each strategic direction again laid out, same language as I just showed you, but it also includes objectives, some things that we're going to be working on. And actually there's another layer below this as well that gets into measurable goals, but this is at the objective level. This is what our operational plan looks like. So we have a couple important artifacts, and the format, the font, the colors, and that stuff isn't what matters in these artifacts. It's the content that's in here, because this is really the basis for the work that our strategy team is doing. It's driving what's happening with our early outs. Ryan just had a staff development meeting with that group. That's what they're leaning into and on to make decisions. And so it's all coming back to here. As a result of looking at the objectives, the strategy team then, like I said, their role was to get into action. How do we take this operational plan, these objectives, and make some things happen? And so the strategy team to look at these and determine that there were some goals that it needed to lean into in order to serve the objectives or the work in this operational plan. And so the first one, and I'll say a couple things. One is, this isn't the end all be all. This is like step one of many steps towards improvement. The other thing is, when the strategy team stepped into this work, and this is something in working with Dan Huberman, who helped us in the process the last couple of years, he talked about how you might have to do some pre-work before you can really get started. So if you look at some of our goals, one of our goals talked about identifying disparities that exist in our buildings between groups of students. Why? Because that showed up in our community engagement, that there are some of our students experience our schools differently depending on demographics and other items. Well, one of the things we realized in taking a look at that is we couldn't really identify disparities because our data wasn't clean. We needed to clean up our data. And so we had to step back. We couldn't just get to look at the data and start. We had to step back and do some work around getting good data. And so you'll see on there, the bottom one, for instance, improve reliability and consistency of student behavior reporting. We had to clean that up. Even the second one there, increase fidelity and accuracy of benchmark and MCA assessments. If the tests and assessments that we were using weren't accurately reflecting what our kids know and can do, we shouldn't be making disparity judgments or work on those. So we had to step back, make sure we had clean data. Some of these are much more straightforward than that, and enabled us to jump into a little bit more action. But these are the goals that the strategy team's been working on this last year. They're in various stages of development or accomplishment. Some of them are pretty much wrapped up, will be in progress now or in kind of maintenance, and some of them are work that's going to continue into the next year, and Anna will kind of hit on that. But what this ultimately then looks like is this process that we've been working through, getting stakeholder feedback, developing strategic directions. Like I said, those drove the operational plan. Objectives came from that operational plan. How do we put kind of some meat on that bone? And then what are those measurable goals? And then we got into this planning phase, and that influenced early outs and how we're doing from there. Anna's going to talk a little bit about, once we got to that planning phase, how we began carrying this work out from kind of concept level to actual work on a day-to-day basis.
All right. So like like Matt said, there was a lot of setup that had to happen really before we could get into the what are we doing? And, you know, by the time we got to the goals, and even setting goals was a challenge, because where you want to be and where you are is sometimes a hard, you know, it can be a hard reality, but I think we came to terms with it and set some reasonable goals. And the first thing we had to do was we had to take those goals and say, okay, what's our intended outcome, and what does success criteria look like for that outcome? And how much time do we have to do it? You know, you guys know, you've worked with our calendar before, there's limited time that we have access really to be able to engage staff or work with staff. So considering all those factors, we just started plugging stuff in. We literally took a calendar and started getting stuff calendared in the spots that we knew that we had access to staff. And from there, we just mapped it out. And you know, I think back to 2 years ago, and really before we had this strategic plan and when we were trying to roll things out, sometimes we were doing this, you know, right before it was going out to staff. And now, timeline wise, then it kind of shifted to we were doing it, you know, weeks before. And then it was, okay, now it's months before. So for example, right now, we have the map for next year pretty much laid out. And we started that work really in November, thinking about what we needed to hit next year, and how we were going to do it, and how to make sure that we had everything in line to do it. So we're really thinking ahead, you know, 6 to 9 months ahead of when we're executing anything. And that gives us a lot of time to get initial input from leaders and stakeholders. So, you know, we brought that work to all of our building leadership team members on May 1st to get their feedback, and we'll be putting final touches on that as we roll into summer and be done with it by July. But so we started with the mapping, and then when we looked at the goals, we kind of said, okay, how do we be sure that, you know, we do everything justice the way it needs to be justice, like the way it needs to be done. And we knew that on goals 1 and 2, those were things that we had already started. We had already started that work. We were partially through that work. We needed some refinement and some clarity around expectations. But ultimately we said, nope, we can tackle that in 23-24. So we jumped into that right away. And those 2 goals were really the focus of our early outs for this school year. We knew on goals 3, 4, and 5 that those 3 items were going to take a lot more research. They were going to take staff input. We really needed to hear from teachers and understand the classroom experience better to get those right. So during the 23-24 school year, we began planning those items. So that planning included developing working groups for each goal. And then from there, we're planning on a 24-25 implementation. So just looking at those working groups, the creation of those was identified like, yes, we need this in November. And that's kind of that date when I said we started looking at next year and saying, okay, what are we doing next year? We identified the 3 areas that we needed a working group for. From there, we identified 3 strategy team members, 1 to lead each group. So Jill led 1 group, Clayton Linder led another, and then Andy Forbort led 1. So the 3 areas were instructional protocols, and that was Jill's group. We had school to home communication, and that was Andy Forbort's group. And we're going to talk about all of these in more detail in a bit. And then K-12 discipline reporting procedures is Clayton Linder's group. In December, we worked really hard to create success criteria for each group so that was laid out and clear before the work was started. We didn't want anybody getting into things that they didn't know what the expectations were going to be. And then Carol reached out to every teacher in the unit and asked them to be part of it. So every teacher had an opportunity to participate in the work, and everybody who asked got put on a team. So we have several teachers on each team to help create that work for the upcoming school year. And then in February, that work began, and those groups have been working all winter and spring to get that work ready for our rollout in July. So once once we have it mapped out, once the content is created, we hop into training staff. And this has been something we've kind of had some stops and starts on, how to get things down through the system and make sure everybody gets the information they need. But really it starts with making sure that we're clear on what we're doing. And this has led to some long meetings and a lot of discussion, but I think really ensuring that we have clarity before things go forward is critical. And then from there, things go to the admin team. So we had 6 trainings this year for our principals, and those were scheduled throughout each cycle to touch base and talk about what's coming up next. What do you need to be prepared for? And we're still kind of working on timing for that to make sure we're getting out far enough ahead of it to make sure that they have time to plan, but not too far where you lose sight of it because, you know, it was too far down the road. But I feel like we're getting better at that every iteration of this. And then from there, the principals during early outs are bringing that to their staff. So staff are getting training during early outs, and typically how it looks is each kind of new skill starts with some initial learning, and it is whole group training. And then from there, they have time to work with that content in smaller groups or in teams. So that's how that kind of works its way down the system to the early out team and then to the classroom practice. Some things that we've learned in implementation or ensuring that things get all the way down the system is that we really need a predictable routine for learning. So one of the things that we've been focused on is not making too many changes at once. So really keeping things looking consistent and making sure that, you know, when we went from fall to spring, there were some key pieces that we kept that looked and felt the same. And we noticed that predictability people appreciated. We had a lot of feedback saying like, thank you, I knew what to expect second semester. It all felt really, really new this fall. But when we did it again the second half of the year, it wasn't so bad. We know that we need a clearly defined learning objective. So what is it that we're working towards? And that needs to be clear for people and the timeline for learning it. We need explicit alignment with the strategic directions. We just need to keep bringing that back again and again to be sure that people know the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we making changes? Why are we asking people to do something new? And then along with that just our communication is continuous on that. We need to, there's a success criteria. So what does it look like to successfully roll this out in your building? If you're an administrator, what does it look like if you're a building leadership team representative? What does it look like? How do you support your early out team? And then at the classroom level, you know, what does this look like? What does successful implementation mean to an individual teacher? We want to make sure materials are easily accessible and the balance between training and time to work with the content or new information. You know, we're trying to find the balance there. How much time do we need to spend in training people versus how much time do they need to explore it and work with their teams? And then of course we need to also have follow-up and progress monitoring. So how are we doing on the things that we implement? We know we're not always going to get it perfect on that first time, but as long as we keep track of it, and every time we plan something new, we have a plan for how we're going to keep track of it. So then from implementation to monitoring, every outcome we had was monitored in some way, like I just said. So, you know, we had one of our goals was that every teacher would have a data wall and EduClimber to help them look at their student data. And that was measured by going in the system and having, you know, as an administrator and being able to see that your teachers had a data wall in there. So that's an example. As we move forward and some of the practices are more classroom based, especially around instructional protocols, that will look more like a classroom walkthrough. And we did a little bit of that last year, but you'll see more of that coming forward. We have structured feedback built right into the cycle. So one PLC in the first half of the, or one early out in the first half of the year and one early out in the second half of the year are dedicated to getting feedback from the teachers on everything we've done in that time in that cycle. And that's been really, really helpful for planning. So we look at all of that feedback, we analyze it at the district level, and then we analyze it by building Dr. Ryan Siegley actually put together some really great building summaries for us the second half of the year that could be used by building leadership teams and to share out to staff. And also, we have 2 large group meetings a year where every building leadership team member comes together. And that's what these pictures are from. And the main purpose of that meeting is to gather feedback from our leaders. What are they seeing? What are they hearing? How could things be improved? And then the second purpose to that is also to show them what's coming, for them to be the first people to kind of see what's coming next. And then ongoing, as we do our weekly principal meetings, the principals are reporting feedback that they're hearing from their building leadership teams. So 23-24 accomplishments. Any questions on that part? Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan.
Anna mentioned a number of things, what to expect from this work. And the first one that I have on there is predictability and routines. Teachers show up on a Wednesday and they already know what to expect for the early out. No longer are they waiting for the day before. They've known months before. So all the early outs are clearly planned out. Agendas are set, all the material is prepped and prepared, and they can see that this Wednesday, here's what we're working on. I think back to being a teacher in the district, it was like I was learning that day what the PLC was going to be, and I had to prep material. No longer is that happening, they know in advance. And so each year, our next year's looks much similar as this year. So it's very predictable. There's a routine and a structure. In addition, we're looking at decreasing the variability from room to room. We should have an equitable experience in every classroom. No matter it doesn't matter where you're at, kids should be getting an equitable learning experience. We have a strong partnership established with special education, which is a big deal. Anna is truly doing a great job leading us in this work. She's really wrangled us in, has clear agendas and timelines, and it's been really nice to walk in the room, know what to expect, but also knowing that there's a strong connection between general ed and special ed, and we're doing work together. Working groups are designed to get more people involved. You heard these working groups are comprised of teachers, principals, district level staff, many teachers. I don't know the number, but I would say there's 50 teachers on these teams. And it's exciting to see K-12 represented as well. And then the feedback we get. We've sent surveys out to gather feedback. We've had individualization of the building. We're not perfect, but we're monitoring and adjusting as we go. And so again, hearing the teacher voice show up and be a part of the work we're doing and the change we're making is very important.
All right, so now we're going to go through kind of each goal and tell you a little bit, give you a little bit more detail on what's happening. So goal 1, we really wanted staff to know how to have a data-driven, solution-focused conversation during an early out. And this was one of those things where we started following the rope backwards going, okay, where do we need to start? And it really came down to ensuring that the data that they were looking at was clean, as Matt said. So in fall, we really hit benchmarking hard and creating some systems and calendars. And some of that was already established, but we had to work really hard to get fidelity there and ensure that we were the right kids. You know, we had all kids being tested. And that they were getting tested in the same window, because if you're comparing classrooms that tested 3 weeks apart, you're looking at different data. So really ensuring that kids were being tested within those windows and that all kids were getting tested. We knew we also had to train teachers to use our data warehouse system, EduClimber. And that was, new computer systems. Some people pick those up super easy and that's no problem, but for a lot, they're a learning curve. And we learned that people really needed explicit training there. And we're still working on that. But we hit those 2 things in fall. And then in spring, we worked on the actual goal. So in the spring, we pulled together training in PD on how to analyze data, how to look at all the data points that we collect in our system, and how to identify a key area for change, and then create an action plan to implement that change. So again, the purpose here wasn't to have the perfect action plan. The purpose was just to go through the motions and learn how to look at data, learn how to identify an area that could be tweaked in your instruction, and then create a plan to implement. So we just wanted people going through that motion. Now, as we roll into next year, this will come back and people will see it again. And we'll be really working towards fidelity and working towards action plans that are gonna have high leverage practices in them. So that's kind of how everything's building on each other, an example of that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Did you skip something?
You're first on this one.
So the second goal that we have is to increase fidelity and accuracy of the benchmark and MCA assessments. One of our biggest hurdles to overcome is getting to all staff to test all kids within the window. And so we monitored that. We looked at EduClimber to ensure that we're getting that. And we did definitely move the needle on that. The assessments we're looking at, STAR, FastBridge, and SABRS, which is being used at all levels. I think some of the things that came out of that as key points is that we wanted to increase communication around benchmark assessments. How are parents being notified of test scores? What information are we sending home? How do we read graphs that are coming out of this? We wanted to also get better at standardization. When we're doing the test, it should be standardized, so every kid is hearing the same thing. We wanted to make sure as well that kids knew what to do before, during, and after the assessment when they finished. And we wanted to also ensure that kids were doing some goal setting around academic progress, that when I do take the test, there's going to be some goal setting around it so I can see my growth over time. And that, again, creates more excitement around learning.
So Ryan and I think Andy and Heidi Claremont at the high school, we worked on some teacher roles and responsibilities, administrator roles and responsibilities for MCA testing. You know, our district goal was 6%, which is an ambitious goal, by the way. And so with this MCA testing, testing in general is near and dear to my heart. I wish we didn't have to do it, but we do. And so since we're going to do it as a teacher, I'm going to embrace it, and it's important. So we sat down and worked through this. So you'll see a teacher role and responsibilities. The administrators had one too for their end. And if you take, I won't read all of this to you, but we were very detailed in looking at the calendar and what needed to happen and when it needed to happen. Prior to this year, there was a lack of consistency. You might have done one thing at East or West, something else at Cohasset, something different at the middle school, and something completely different at the high school and Big Fork. So we tried to eliminate that variability too, so that we could start looking at data that was clean. What is going on in our district across the way? Again, like I said, coming up with administrator roles. One thing that, and Ryan and I, we had some large group meetings, but then Ryan and I kind of took this. What we did is we tried to think at the granular level. What teacher that doesn't have a ton of skills potentially could pick this up? And you'll see on the right-hand side, if you were in the digital copy, all of those things are hyperlinks. So we asked them to send letters home to parents. If they didn't know how to do that, a letter was provided for them. If they didn't know how to go into campus to send a message, there was I think, Ryan, did we do a little video? We did a video where we did something there. So we really tried to make sure we had tools here. And the slide that had the pictures of people providing feedback, this was something we asked for feedback on. And we said, what can we do better? And we have already gotten some feedback. Hey, we need this for next year, and this is how we can be better. As a teacher, these MCA testing protocols, for me, it was really nice. This checklist was really nice to be able to follow that through. I am a teacher that's used one-on-one conferencing with students for years. And so that's on here. I know that we were asking people to do that. Hopefully that's going to continue because it's important with students and parents. And the last part of that, again, it's been more communication and clarity than ever in these testing protocols. So kids have been excited, kids have been engaged, and I think this was a success on our part. So
plan for the 24-25 school year. Our goal is to continue to refine our structures, our communication procedures and structures. We're going to continue to get better. We're going to learn more and do better. We're going to repeat work on goals 1 and 2 toward fidelity. So it was introduced last year, but this coming year, we're going to continue to move it forward. We're going to begin some implementation on goals 3, 4, and 5. An elementary level of special ed as well. We're going to address state mandates with the READ Act. We have a lot of training, as you know, happening with that, starting on the 22nd here of this month. And then looking at an elementary ELA curriculum that also comes with training and things of that nature. So we have a busy year planned. We're ready for it. We've got a lot of things going on right now, getting planned and prepared, and it's exciting stuff because again, this is the right work.
All right. And as Ryan said, one of the components to refining our structures, and we heard this feedback from a lot of staff, was we just needed one spot where all the materials were. So Jen Shadeen just went to work, and when you put her on something, she just gets it done. So we put her on the website, and she went to town, and she's developed a great teaching and learning website, and we wanted what we wanted was just a one-stop shop for teachers, where anything teaching and learning related they could find. So no matter what teacher you are, if it's something we've done in the early out cycles, you can find it here. If you have materials for your specific area, so for special education, we've been using a shared drive, as you know, but that will get converted into a link off this website. So that if you're a teacher, you just start here and you can find everything you need. But it'll really be a one-stop shop. It'll be kind of organized by the goals so that it's clear and it's easy to use. And as Carol said, as we get feedback on things and we learn, then we can update the materials or add new materials to respond to people's needs as they ask for things.
One of the other goals, the third goal, had to do with school-to-home communication. I want to make sure that we're drawing connections back to where this all started. So back to the community input document, communication to home. What do I know about my kid? It all goes back to that synthesized into a communication strategic direction. If you look at the operational plan under strategic direction, number 5, objective 2, that's what drove this goal right here. So that objective, common expectations, that's what drove the strategy team to say, we need a goal around this, we're ready for this. And so, like Anna mentioned, we had a team get together. Andy Forbort led this one, having conversations about what is normal, what can we expect at the secondary level, what can we expect at the elementary level. This is still in development. We still have things to learn from our families about what it is that they want and how they want it. So this is a in-process goal, like Anna laid out on that previous slide. We have 3, 4, and 5 that are kind of in process and rolling out more next year. But that's, again, all of these goals at some point in time connect back to this operational plan, fed by those strategic directions and informed by that input that we got from stakeholders.
So the one that I'm going to be talking about is instructional protocols. Jill led this one, and this is just a little one-pager about what it is. Obviously, our business in the district is teaching, so instructional protocols is also very near and dear to my heart. So if you'll take a look at your one-pager, you can take a look in this presentation too about some of those things. But the purpose was to improve Tier 1 instruction, improve what we're doing in the classroom. And so these are all still in progress. So if you take a look at your one-pager, team members are from all areas across the district. So we have administrators on there, but we have teachers from every area. Sarah Schofield also was helping us in here with Avid, et cetera. But those teachers are representative of very committed to this work. So if you take a look at that number 1, the team members, those teachers are really committed to what's happening. The purpose of the project, again, like I said, was the Tier 1 to improve student achievement and decrease that variability between classrooms. We shouldn't have one classroom where this is happening and something very completely different in another classroom. And we're talking about those high leverage instructional practices. There are things that we can be doing as a district that are going to see great results. And so work smarter, not harder, right? So we're trying to do some of that stuff. The when and the what. So the team met 3 times to complete the checklist. And heading into next year too is looking at some reading across the district, some baseline data, et cetera, the instructional practices and a training plan. So what do teachers need? What do teachers need? And it's not a one size fits all. It's what does David Marty need? What does Pat Majority need? What do all the teachers need? We're talking about changes to be made, and then there's some subgroup work going on with that right now too. So pretty exciting stuff, despite all the other things going on. So
The next goal, or the next group, was set out to improve reliability and consistency of student behavior. Again, Clayton led this work, did a nice job. There's about 15, 20 members from the district on this team. This relates back to the operational plan of improving equitable outcomes, access and representation, and creating a culture of trust, engagement, and belonging. Again, part of this work was to develop a system-wide of procedures and expectations around behavior. It also is to shore up that reporting process. And so part of that work was creating a flow chart, K-12, of what's a behavior referral office managed or classroom managed in order to create that equitable experience. Great dialogue. I was a part of this group once in a while, but some great dialogue in there from all levels. K-12, as you know, it's a little bit different in the elementaries than high school. We had some great dialogue, and I think we came to a good plan. And right now they're planning out the rollout of the training. So very exciting stuff that we'll see in our show up in our staff meetings and early outs next year.
So just to reiterate, I think it's really important to note that all of these subjects, teachers are involved in creating the trainings that are going to roll out to staff. There's representation from like all levels. So elementary, middle school, high school on each team to be sure that they give that input and that things are relevant for each level. And yeah, I mean, that's what we wanted. We knew we needed teacher voice on these teams. We knew we needed their input when designing training materials. So they're heavily involved in all of that.
A couple things, Julie, I'm going to ask you to go back a couple slides to to that one, for instance. And can you click on that project 4 where it says project 4? We'll see if you hopefully have access to that. All right. What I wanted to show there, and maybe I'll be able to do that here before we get going. There's a great deal of intention and design, even on the structure of how we put these teams together. And this is, again, I'll recognize Anna's ability to kind of put some structures together for us.
there it is.
All right, great. So if you make that larger, Julie, I'm putting you on the spot here. This is great. We love that. So yeah, if you just like increase that size to like 150 or something, up to the left. There you go. Every one of our work teams had a document like this that laid out what's the goal, what's the strategic direction that this is tied to. Who's on the team? You scroll down, we got the lead there, that team identified, the timeline, what does this do? If you go down further, the purpose of the project, why are we doing this? How do we know if we're going to be done? That's that success criteria that Anna talked about, project completion. So every Clayton, Andy, the whole team can go through and say, we did this. And then if you continue to scroll, some considerations down there, like these are things to be thinking about. The strategy team is kind of commissioning this work. There's some things that we think you need to make sure and not forget about. And then at the bottom, if there are artifacts or materials to create, what are those things that the strategy team expects to get back? Every one of our teams had this going into it. So it was really clear on the front end. All the team members had this. They knew exactly what it was that the work was. If there's one thing that I think I've learned, I think our team has learned, the more clear we are about what we want, the more likely it is we'll get it. 2 at a time, that's been true. And so that's clarity, accountability. If you have clarity, the accountability is not a scary thing anymore. There's some other things too, and you can go back, please, Julie, to the main document or the main slide deck. Not all of this goes without, issues, right? This is challenging work. There's productive struggle or productive tension here. There's tension between urgency, like we want change and we want it now, and there's tension between that and people's capacity for change. There's tension between continuity and consistency across every building. And that's one of the things that you can see in this diagram. Consistent shows up there a couple different times. There's tension between consistency and continuity from building to building, room to room, and some degree of building autonomy. Like the high school is different than Big Fork, is different than Cohasset, is different than East and West. How do we recognize those buildings' uniquenesses, but also make sure that everybody's working on the same things? Because we have heard that it's people like knowing that they're not the only ones doing this thing. And so we have that tension. We have tension between really tight structured time and time that's less structured. We have that tension that exists. And that, we have this tension. We have tension between, Anna talked about getting feedback. We've heard that, we want more grade level and department time on Wednesdays, tension against how do we make sure that our work is structured and aligned with the goals we've identified. So all these tensions exist and we don't get it right every time. We learned this year. Anna talked about the feedback cycles we had in there. Those pictures, it was one of the coolest experiences since I've been here. We had 60 people in this room on May 1st that were walking around talking with people maybe in the district that they had never met before about how the year went in these particular categories. How did this effort that we put into this particular, how did that go, and what can you tell us, how can we do better? That was a really powerful day. We learned a lot. We learned some things that we need to do better, and we will. We're not getting it. This is a work in progress, something we've said from the beginning. This is about progress and not perfection. We're going to be better today than yesterday and this year than last, because we don't always get it 100% right. We don't always get it 100% on time, and we don't always get 100% participation. So how do we ask, what's the barrier here? How do we try to resolve that? How do we educate the way we need to and try to put people in a position to be successful and help move the whole kind of thing along. But this was an exercise we did at the end of that May 1st date where we asked everyone this question. You can see we had 58 responses. Almost everybody clicked through. What was 1 year that describes this year's plans, trainings, and early outs. And the bigger the word, the more times it was said. Intentional was the word that popped up the most. And that, I think, meant a lot to the strategy team, that the effort to create plans that were consistent, intentionality. I think that inspires confidence and in the work. Again, there are people that don't necessarily agree all the time, and we're listening and trying to adjust. But I think this wordle meant a lot to us in terms of the intent and where we wanted to land, and we felt pretty good about getting that feedback. Again, not from a small little sample size. We're talking about out of those 60 people that were there, or 65. The majority of them were teachers. This was a room predominantly of teacher leaders. And if we have 260, whatever the number is, a pretty significant proportion of our teachers that were in that room. And so to get that feedback. So again, we'll continue to work, we'll continue to learn, we'll continue to balance those tensions and live in that middle and make progress. But I thought it would be good. This is what our strategy team's been working on. We'll continue to work on. This is hard, long, messy, complicated work. One of the things we've talked about is that as an organization, any organization, I don't care who you are, you have cultural history, you have history that creates, ruts, behaviors, all these things. And part of the work of this team is figuring out what ruts do we need to get out of. And sometimes they're deep and hard to get out of. And sometimes you need a high lift jack and a whatever to get out. And sometimes it's just about communicating better. And so we're wrestling with all of that. But I'm really proud of the work. I'm proud of the people that are pitching in, and I'm proud of the, changes we've made this year and the progress we've made. Questions for the group?
Pat?
Incredible. I said it when Jen was here last board meeting, consistency, continuity. You just see it starting to focus in and narrow in on it. And my comment here is not to be negative on anybody that's been here in the past, but this is the first time since my tenure on the board where there's been an effort of tearing down the silos from building to building, grade level to grade level, and so on, to bring that consistency and continuity forward. So thank you to everybody involved in this. This change is difficult, but it takes time and intentionality. I think everybody wants it, just circling the wagons to make it happen. That's a challenge in itself. So I really, really appreciate the work going into this. And Matt, just one comment and kind of a common question is that we started with a survey from the community.
Mhm.
And I know the results of that survey has brought out on paper here. I think this is an opportunity for you or maybe members of your team to go in the community and talk about, one, we listen to you. Two, here's what we're doing. Not that you need to get into the weeds with the community, but bringing it back out to them. This is what you told us. Here's what we're doing. Here's how we're implementing it. It's a work in progress aspect of it. With all that being said, I think it could pay dividends for us down the road.
Yeah.
Hats off.
I appreciate that, Pat. There's a couple things we feel the same way because, like we talked about in that referendum conversation, trust and confidence. How do we inspire trust and confidence? A big part of that, I think, is doing what we say we're going to do and that we're listening, just like you said. So I think, as we're going through this website refresh that we're going to be required to do, part of that is building this out. And my vision for that really revolves around getting this out as one of the things. And a lot of click through here, like, well, what does this mean belonging? What's happening there? The other thing too, that in that communications plan, we're talking about how do we get this out and help people see see themselves in it. So we've talked about creating some vignettes, video vignettes for people to see, this is what's happening. What is equitable education? What does it look like? Capture some student work, some students in there doing some things and taking the opportunity to explain. And that'll be a really important part, Pat, and I gotta make sure we don't miss that the reason we're here is because we listen to you, and I just gotta make sure we don't miss that important connection.
Again, great work. Great work.
I would echo that. Astonishing work. Extremely well done. A great deal of depth and thought goes into this, and a great deal of incorporation of a lot of minds on this. And thank you for doing this. Well done.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, but you guys are literally changing a system.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to do, so there's a lot of work that went into that. And if someone put on those words, miraculous, I mean, that's pretty good feedback.
I think the challenge is you're kind of constantly living in like 3 time zones. It feels like almost because you're implementing what you're implementing now, and then you're trying to plan for like, okay, making sure it continues and you work towards fidelity. And then, you're thinking about, okay, what's coming next and making sure that's really good. And then you're thinking about what's coming next, that we need to start building leadership on, so you're kind of living in all these different worlds and it gets a little tricky, but I think we're figuring out, we learn a little bit every time we do something and we just adjust and try to make it better for people.
Great vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, great presentation too, this is really a complex process, and you guys laid out a simplified presentation, which really shows up well.
And I think I need to say this too, the reductions of the last few years have, we are running on lean staff. Anna's doing this kind of strategy work on top of being the special services director. Ryan's in here doing this on top of his role. Carol's doing this on top of being a full-time teacher and union president. And I think that's really impressive. It says a lot about the dedication of the people that are here, because they see how important it is and want us to succeed. They want us to win. So, and that goes through, for every one of the people on that team. That's really above and beyond kind of thinking, working, that kind of stuff. So really proud of them.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is shared course offerings. Darren Hofstad and Ken Coster. Tough presentation.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough one to follow. We're not,
I wish we had that many things to talk about in the shared programming. So this will probably be a little bit shorter discussion, but, on our end, on the principal end of the presentation you just heard too, I think there are many like that were in our leadership meeting on May 1st, and I think there are many throughout our buildings that would echo what you saw, and probably some of the same things you saw. Darren, I'm not gonna speak for you, but I mean, you've been in the district for a long time. I've been here as an administrator for a long time, and there is a sense of purpose and direction that we've got a lot going on, so anytime you can maintain that focus and keep that focus where it needs to be, that's always welcome. So appreciate the direction and all that hard work.
when you see that highlighted word intentional, change is tough, and there's been a lot. I know for our building, in terms of the big picture, but it's something that hasn't gone unnoticed in terms of the intentionality behind it and how it connects back to our strategic vision. So it's big, but we're not done yet. There's a lot, and I don't know that will ever be like done, but it gives us vision and direction. So
Traction. Yep. As far as shared programming goes, I know that I shared a sheet with some of the programming that we've got going between our two high schools in the district. And I know that the discussion has been taking place for longer than probably, Darren and I have probably been involved in it. Probably go back to maybe some conversations Mr. Schroeder was in, I don't know. However, there's kind of two different tiers here, and Darren jump in too, but we've got some I ask things going on with shared programming, but then we've got shared programming within just our two buildings. And one of the things that's taken place over the last 2 years has been the Grand Rapids High School and the Big Fork High School talking about what can we do to partner up more. And it's not without its challenges, but last year we started with a little bit in Spanish, and we were able to carry that over as we lost through our reductions. We lost some of our in-person Spanish, and then we've also had some pre-calc going on this year. So we've had Spanish 1 and pre-calc taking place this year, being offered at the Grand Rapids High School. We're receiving that online through telepresence systems. Beginning of the year took off very well for pre-calc. No equipment issues there. They were able to get going. We had some equipment issues in Spanish. We had to work to get those solved, and that was a bumpier start. So that equipment piece is definitely a thing that it makes a big difference. And you can see that in those two classes.
the days of a telepresence classroom are gone, where we had that equipment, managed by Cisco. It's just something that's obsolete. End of life is a term that our technology department uses. So we've really gone to more portable units. This is something that, as an instructor, I was able to experience delivering the Big Fork with calculus years ago, and we've been able to continue that connection. But like Ken said, with our HVAC construction project last summer, getting our both classrooms online with their own mobile units or portable units was more of a challenge. And you lose so much with any technology problems in terms of making that connection with the class. So we had a bumpier start with Spanish, but I think as a testament to both of those courses, teaching pre-calc and Spanish, when we look at next year, is those same students in Big Fork transitioning up to Spanish 2 and to calculus. So there is a population of those students that thrived in that environment. It's unique because the instructor in Grand Rapids has got students in front of them, and they got the interactivity of students from Big Fork in there as well. So it's not been without its challenges for sure, but being able to offer these courses, one of the components too is our pre-calc class this year is also a SITS course. So the students in Grand Rapids in person are getting college and schools credit through UMD, as is the Big Fork students. So,
Which is really important
Yep.
to me, to make sure that we're providing those opportunities for the students that I'm representing as well. And definitely want to salute both that Spanish 1 teacher, Richard Pierce, and Mr. Chris Granley doing the calc too. I mean, it's difficult to prepare for students in 2 locations. There are times where, I'm picking something up in the parking lot from Mr. Pierce during the year so that, the kids can have the same things in Big Fork that they've got going on down here. And there are other staff behind the scenes helping out with some of those things too, the logistics. So we're making it happen. I think that's an evolution. I see it as a start. The board, I think it was end of March when I did my principal report. We were in Big Fork, and I talked about at that time, Darren and I both submitted school options indicator reports earlier that month. And as we look at shared programming possibilities, we very open and wanting to do more. And I don't necessarily always want Big Fork to need to be on the receiving end. I want them to be on the giving out end as well. And because I think we've got some unique skills and talents in Big Fork as well that can be utilized throughout the district. It isn't without its challenges. One of the reasons we haven't been able to do, or a couple of the reasons we haven't been able to do more, has been, and Mark, maybe you remember this, but the master schedule in Big Fork, because you are so tight and it's such a small system, but when we move one thing, there's a domino effect. And it's almost like a rock hitting the windshield, and it just goes in these different directions. You have to figure it out. Okay, now if we move this, it's going to affect these 4 other things. And if we adjust those, it's going to move 6 other, so we're constantly doing that. And I work very closely with Siri Pareto, and we look specifically at that secondary schedule. So it's difficult. It's not impossible. It's difficult to make things fit. And on Grand Rapids' end, I know, that deals with class size and some other things.
That's been a big component. We'd love to be able to expand and look at, when we're running courses, is lean. And what I mean by that is we have numbers that we are minimums, but quite honestly, right now, we have some maximums that are really too large to be comfortable in terms of serving the students both in person and via telepresence. So we have a tremendous catalog with regards to college and schools, but also our tech courses and some of the variety. We'd love to be able to share the entire catalog, but there are some challenges definitely with our class sizes and our offerings. So and our schedules don't match up perfectly either. When we went to our 4-period lunch, it definitely had some domino effects with our scheduling. So Ken and myself, we try to center our shared programming around a common hour, like first hour is a real popular one to be able to have that work out.
It's a little easier to make work
Yep.
that particular hour as well. And we are looking at other options as well, trying to just develop programming. It's not always shared just between the 2 schools. Both sites have some certified nursing assistant courses going on, partnering with Minnesota North, but also, in my school, Big Fork Valley as well. I think I was on the phone with Scott Patrol this morning more about that. Both schools have also begun manufacturing internships where there's a nice partnership out in the community through career pathways, and kids are getting some on-the-job experience and some high school credit along with it. And I mentioned last time I was in front of you about one particular student that was getting some online courses that were actually being sponsored through the 49ers Union, because that's a career path that he's taking. He was able to work it in as an elective. He's getting actual apprenticeship hours through the 49ers Union for it. As long as he passes, he's getting very good grades right now, but as long as he passes, the district's getting reimbursed for that. So looking for other programming options for students that are applicable to them is a charge that we've been following as well, and sharing information from that. But, what questions do you have regarding programming?
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you guys tell me, how is the two classes, the telepresence or whatever set up? Is it a camera in these rooms? Is it a laptop that faces everyone?
So right now what we have is a Spark board system, and it's manufactured through Cisco. So the unique thing about it is it's got 3 cameras mounted. And I think we had something similar in our old boardroom, where whoever's speaking, that camera will pick up the action. So both Rachel Pierce and Chris Granley are very mobile teachers. They'll teach from the center of the classroom rather than from the board. So they're able to, the cameras will lock in on a speaker or a student, and then simultaneously they'll share their whiteboard or smart board with the students up in Big Fork. So it's a pretty interactive experience, but there is also looking at, making sure that this is sustainable, kind of some of the options that we can do just with our Google Classroom as well. So at this point, we're still using and utilizing our 2 Spark systems, but they have a shelf life too, and they're pretty expensive.
And as that goes away, I mean, there may be other technology, available, but if it's 1 or 2 students, then it could be something as simple as a Google Meets as well, at least for the student receiving it, on that end.
We've also built in some time, especially in our pre-calculus class, where Mr. Granley will meet individually with the students in Big Fork as well on some prep time to be able to catch some kids up and walk through some problems. And in a course like that, there's definitely a need for that one-on-one.
That's nice. I have one more question. So on the IASK, the healthcare career exploration, it says from Greenway, because I know they had their CNA program set up there. Is that that's what we're referring to?
Well, they're actually doing a healthcare careers exploration. It's not a CNA certification.
Okay.
Their teacher's that they have doing that is, she's been doing it for a few years. She's a pretty interactive teacher too. I've had the opportunity to, just about a week ago, have to stop and pick some stuff up from her. And I walked in during the last hour, and I got a chance to see it from her end, which was nice. Big Fork students are on the monitor. Nashwauk-Keewatin students are on the monitor. There's a guest speaker on the monitor that's coming in remotely, and she was off to the side of the room and talking and interacting with everybody. And again, it's an evolution. She's been doing that for a little while. She's got students in person. She's got students in 2 locations plus a speaker, and she's pulling it off. And it was nice to see it from that end.
That's great.
Yeah.
And Greenway's been bringing in Ms. Schennebarger to actually do the CNA course. So that's what the Grand Rapids High School is going to be embarking on.
Okay.
She's going to be on site.
And we're working on
Next
something
year.
similar as well, but it would be our instructor will either be from Big Fork Valley following Minnesota North's curriculum syllabus, or it'll be a Minnesota North instructor. One or the other.
Awesome. Thank you.
Again, I appreciate the efforts here going forward, and it's about opportunities, right? Whether it's in Big Fork or Grand Rapids, Sharon, or through IASK. And as spoken tonight, there's always going to be challenges, right? And with those challenges, sometimes there's need to be resources. And I guess from the board, I certainly don't want to speak for all the board members, but as one board member, if there's challenges there that require resources, bring it forward to matter somebody so we can sit down and talk about it and see if we can come up with those resources, dollars, whatever it is, to really make this happen. I think it's just important for students to have the same opportunities all the way around with it. So I didn't really know. I asked the question, what are we doing? Certainly helps me see we're doing more than I thought we were doing, to be honest with
Well,
you.
good.
So,
And hopefully, there's an evolution here and we get to more. When I think about resources, I think the two areas that come to mind right away are equipment, because we are gonna have equipment that's gonna hit end of life. The other piece is training, whether it's a very new teacher or maybe it's a veteran teacher, but it's never had to, teach maybe other than our COVID years, which was really a hurry up thing. In that mode of having students live in front of you, but also not neglecting or forgetting about the ones that are there online as well. So that training piece and getting information back and forth, and those kinds of things. Those are the resources I think about right away.
where are you at with the equipment now as far as end of life? Are we like around the corner where it need to be replaced? Are we 3-4 years down the
Probably a
road?
question for Mr. Larson.
Yeah,
more than us,
good question.
but I think, right now, those systems that are going, I think on both ends are working pretty well. Do I know how long? I don't know.
But those Spark units are better than 5 years old.
Yeah, yeah. And quite honestly, the one that Chris is using, Gramley in his classroom, was the one I was using, which was pretty new.
You've been around a long time now.
I've been around for a while, so I think of myself maybe, but the one that we had Rachel using, we kind of piecemealed parts together to get it to function. So there's some of that too. Like if it's up to us, we kind of put things together. But I don't know, I guess on Big Fork's end, pretty much monitors.
They're both there. They were both there when I got there. This is my 3rd year there, so I mean, they might not have been. They were around they're at least COVID age.
And those telepresence rooms, I mean, to be honest, they've gone by the wayside in every other district or IS school in our area. So we've been able to make the most of what we've had.
So Matt, is it possible to get a projected cost to upgrade, see where we're at?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's some place we could maybe chase money and make it happen.
There's definitely some nice stuff out there. Minnesota North is a great example of, they've got, 6 or 7 different campuses, and they're doing things. And if you walk into a room over there right now, you're going to see a monitor, you're going to see the cameras like Darren was talking about that are going to follow the movement of the sound. They've got what they call an owl sitting out here. I think the camera's on top of the owl, isn't it? And then it's a microphone as well.
I'd like to get ahead of it instead of wait for it to break down and then kind of, we got a class tomorrow, what are we going to do, type thing. And I realize it's expensive, we'll just say expensive, but if we don't know it, how do we plan for the future, right?
The technology is one component. The human capital is probably
Sure.
more important.
Yep.
Is getting a teacher that's, whether they're trained, qualified, willing. There's certainly a lot of factors that go into it.
I think one of the dynamics that it's not hard to overlook is just that class size piece that we have going on. Going into year 5 of reductions, when we were talking, Darren and I were talking, it's like, well, the problem is I got 32 kids in that room already, and all of a sudden I'm going to add 6, and distance teaching creates that tricky dynamic anyway, and then all of a sudden you take a big class and add that complexity to it. It's different than if we had 18 kids in there and 6, but because of those reductions and the compounding, all of a sudden we have that going on a lot more than I think people recognize or remember.
I also think there's a good story here for the public though too, right?
And lastly, I would just add that I try to do it in kind of tiers. Like, first thing you do is you look to see, can we add that? Can we offer this in person somehow? And if we can't, then we say, okay, can we take care of that within the district? If we can't, then we look at, online through IAS because at least you're closer. And then if we can't, now you're looking online somewhere else. Most of those other courses, those Min-Infinity courses.
Are there any courses out there, Darren, back to your point, where you can send a teacher to be trained up on how to teach through the system?
Well, I think one of the things that we haven't capitalized on, Infinity originated here. IASC started that, and it was called Vital then, way back in the day. And one of the things that Vital did and Infinity has continued, they do a good job training their teachers in how to teach via distance, whether that's synchronous or asynchronous. And I don't know that I know that we as a IASC taken advantage of their expertise in that. I say they, it's really because we're a part of it, right? So we just had a conversation with Joe McClure, who has been the director for many years. She's retiring, and the new director coming in, about what are the opportunities there of things that Infinity's really good at that we maybe haven't used before, whether that's training or helping us with some of these things where there's friction or things that are getting in the barriers. How could they help us? Because again, you were there at the beginning when it all started, and so that's a place where we could get some help with it, I think.
One last kind of deviating a little bit, but talked about difficulty scheduling. Do we still do any early bird?
We do. And that was one thing we've kind of approached too. I think the geography of students and the transportation issues, we don't certainly want to put it in a spot where that's the only option.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that's definitely been something that we talked about.
Yeah, we explored that, I think, for this year, and it was an equity component with,
Yeah.
like Darren said, the travel, and not all students are gonna be able to make that work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Last item on the agenda, new legislative mandates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first thing I want to do is make sure that it says this list is exhaustive. There should be a word "not" there. This list is not exhaustive. I took out some of the main ones that affect our school district specifically. And there's better than three pages here. MSBA has a list that is more comprehensive, that includes things relative to things that don't affect us. But certainly, and I didn't go through and count how many are on this list, but there's 20 or 30 on here for sure. I don't know if you want to go through these or if this list is good enough, or kind of what you're thinking, but or highlight a couple, or any thoughts on that?
Could you at least highlight some of the key ones that are impacting us?
Yeah, I think you heard Jamie Goodwin last week talk about the first two, right? She hit on those two. We have those going. There's some funding ones there that are significant, that e-learning days and the referendum don't affect us now, but could at some point. The required academic standards and ethnic studies and the Holocaust and those kinds of things obviously affect us. Those affect courses that we're offering in our schools, curriculum that we're offering. There was a delay, there's a proposed delay in the legislature this year around the civics? Around civics, delaying that out a year. But again, and I'll say it until I can't say it anymore. Every single time the legislature creates a requirement of a course and a year, they restrict a kid's opportunities every time. Because that means a kid can't take something they maybe want to take when they want to take it, or at all. And I think the legislators are trying to do the right thing. I think, we've taught courses in US government forever. We didn't need the legislature to tell us to do it. And we certainly didn't need them to tell us what year that kid should take that class. Same is true with personal finance. We have that in the course book already. It was a requirement. You established that, but those are really frustrating. On the second page, some other things there, things that our principals are having to sort of work around, those readmission plans, ensuring we're checking all those boxes. The discipline policy, we've been working on that and did that in our last couple board meetings, so took care of that. Our elementary principals implemented the recess piece there, where recess cannot be used as a punishment. And again, some of these are, it's flock shooting by the legislature. We weren't doing some of these things. We wouldn't, they're not good practice. But people obviously were. Paraprofessional training, again, we were exceeding that amount. That wasn't something that we were behind on. We were actually ahead of that. We took care of the credit for employment with healthcare providers in a policy recently. Obviously, the prohibition on American Indian mascots is something that's specific to us, and that date, David, you mentioned this at our last meeting, I think that date was recently moved, or will be moving forward a year. And I think that has to do with the legislature realizing that that's a bad law that was implemented badly. Yeah, those are some of the highlights. I think that the one on the back page, we're still kind of working through that school library aid piece, and also the literacy position. Jen Shadeen mentioned in our last meeting that we have to put into place at some point. And there's resources going to our service cooperatives, and they're setting up some structures around literacy. And so it could be that we're able to work with them on those positions, but that's sort of yet to be seen. But I think just this is not an exhaustive list. All of these will impact us at some point in some way. Most, I think one of the things that gets lost on people that maybe are working on these laws, even though something might not have a direct financial implication, time costs money. And whether it directly costs us money, or that's time that is spent doing something when it had previously been spent doing something else, there's a cost there. And there is time in here all over the place that our principals don't have now. Our directors don't have now. And so that's as frustrating as the actual dollars and cents expense sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. And in 6 months, we're going to have a whole new list.
We'll have another list, David.
To deal with. Is there anything on the existing list that you look at and say, oh my goodness, how are we going to deal with that one?
I think one of the things we're watching real closely is the READ Act. Like, what is going to happen there? Both sides have indicated that they want to do something there. How that plays out is significant. There were some really troubling ideas that would have resulted in people getting paid twice for the same hours, intentionally written that way. And so I think there's been some movement on that. So we're watching that closely. That READ Act MOU that I brought forward last meeting is directly impacted by how that conference committee lands with stipend dollars and training dollars and those kinds of things. What curriculum we're able to get reimbursed for and how much that is big. We know we have an ELA curriculum problem. Our core curriculum isn't sufficient. We need something there. So that will be big. The seasonal rec bill, I think is probably not going to make it this time around, but I think it got a lot of attention. It got a hearing, it got tested. And so I think that puts us in a good position for that to go through next spring. That's a really important bill for our district and a lot of districts around here. The mascot bill obviously is important. I think the dynamics with the senator and how that's affected voting and how willing people are to play in the sandbox well. I mean, I think if nothing else, that slowed down some things that could end up impacting us. The bonding bill and the adjustments to the last year's bonding bill or last year's, infrastructure projects. We have, our $1.5 million that we're involved in with Big Fork is secure, but the adjustments that we proposed and seemed like we were going to be able to get done on the language there, I'm not, it's 50-50 whether that's going to happen now because of how everything's getting drawn out and the priority that's getting placed on everything else. So that one, I think it's troubling and disappointing if that goes from something that seemed really likely to have happened that would have made our lives a lot simpler to all of a sudden, because of, you know, the drama, I guess I'll just leave it at that. It may impact us by requiring a lot more work by many more people. So that's yet to be seen.
So now, I'm sorry. go ahead.
Thank you.
So this is just a portion of the 67, I
Yep.
believe was the number that came out of
Right.
the 23 session. Is this something that maybe we could just highlight at our board meeting that, yeah, it's publicized? We're talking in the workshop here, I don't know how many people actually go, but ICTV will pick it up and push it out there. I know we mentioned it, just that there was 67, but I think it'd be a good talking point.
Yeah.
Spend a couple minutes on it and say, you know, these are the ones that really impact us out of that 67.
Yeah. I'll bring it back next Monday. After I add that word "not" in there.
What's that?
After I add that word "not" in there, it really will help me.
When I look at this list, the thought that comes to mind is, okay, who's gonna do this one?
Yep.
Because nobody's available to do that.
Right.
And
Well, everything is a knee-jerk reaction down there, though. Something happens and immediately
Yeah.
they run to the legislature, get the law changed, instead of taking a step back and say, how can we prevent this from happening without having a law change, you know? But it's just the nature of that beast down there.
is there any other business?
Thank you.
There are none. Meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, man. Do you have any, I don't have anything to find, do I?
Darren,